board. Aaron had also planned on being here today. He has actually has family that lives down here, but due to an illness in the family, is not able to attend. I'm Bob Blanford. Just to give a little bit of background, I retired from the forest industry 9 years ago. Mostly in wood procurement, and then as the plant manager for the last year before I retired. And this is Sandra Ashworth. Sandra is not currently employed by the library, but I asked her to attend to talk about her past relationships with ICRMP. Sandra was the Boundary County Library Director from 1996 to her retirement in 2016. First Lady Laura Bush presented the library with prestigious Institute of Museum Library Service National Award for Museum and Library Service in 2002. Boundary County was named the best small library in America by the Library Journal magazine in 2017 as a direct result of Sandra's work. Sandra stepped in with no compensation at 80 years old after the resignation of Craig Anderson due to health reasons. Sandra helped get the library back open as we search for a new director. Sandra has also worked with ICRMP to resolve claim issues. And she can give us a lot of background information on the library to address any questions. We are here to address the board's concerns and work together to reduce and eliminate future concerns. I don't know if we did receive another notice of a tort claim at our Thursday board meeting. I don't know if this was sent to ICRMP, as our director resigned on Saturday.
As far as I know, Mr. Chairman, we don't have anything by way of a tort claim.
I do have a copy of that.
Well, really, tort claims, if I may, Mr. Chairman, are really not the purpose of this meeting.
I just wanted to be aware of it.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Okay, and we have had a long-term positive relationship with ICRMP and want and need to continue this relationship for the future of our library. Some things we have done, we have hired Omnia as an HR firm to create an employee handbook, help us on policy issues, and keep the library current in employment practices and advise on personnel issues. We are conducting a policy audit that are comprehensive and that the library district is in compliance with all the state and local statutes. The board was unaware of the falling out between our director and ICRMP. We thought we were proceeding as a team with ICRMP. Our hope is to provide you with confidence that the library district takes responsibility in doing its due diligence and maintaining an environment that limits risk exposure of all library representative partners and stakeholders. And I guess with that, we open it up to any comments or questions you may have that we can address.
Mr. Chair, I just have a question. How many employees does the library employ?
How many employees?
When I left, we had about 14, and then when I came back, when Craig had to retire so suddenly, actually, at that point I was a consultant at the board. I volunteered my services pro bono as a consultant because along with my experience in the library, after we won the 2002 award, I was asked to serve on the National Commission on Libraries and Information Science by President Bush. So I had 2 presidential appointments and served on that. It's an independent agency that focused on what amounted to optimum library services and information resources for the American people. It was considered by Congress as a national security issue that the American people had access to the optimum possible. So in in that work, what we were developing was basically what amounts to that at current times, a report portal in the nation's libraries. And so, with a variety of other backgrounds, when Craig retired, so suddenly, one employee stepped in as interim, but there had been no transition time. Like when I retired, there was a whole year to audit files, do the training, all of that kind of thing. With poor Derek, it was amounted to about 3 hours. So I was, part of my responsibility at that time was to try to start sorting out files and see what was going on. Because as a consultant, not just helping this new, totally been there, he was familiar with management, he's had the management skills, but what was required, what all the legal budget responsibilities, all the rest of it. The other part of my job as a consultant that the board accepted was that I would assess, basically audit the library and complete an overall look from how the personnel were being handled, what they were doing, how they were doing it, why they were doing it, and what needed to be done to bring it, make sure that we were operating with best practices. And of course, the biggest concern that the board had, and I had as a former director and stuff, was making sure that this HR piece was in good order and all of that, looking at that, how that staff was operating, how our relationships within the community were going, and that kind of thing, and how we were perceived, and what kind of positive impacts were we providing to the community. So of course, times have changed. Back since 1996, we didn't get our first computer until about 1995. And so there were lots of possibilities, and then just seeing how things were done. Where can we change things? You know how it is with any business organization, you get ruts. So I was working on that, and then a very great candidate stepped forward for the director's job, because the board hadn't even had time to really advertise for a new director. We went from having a director to not having a director in less than 3 weeks. And so we had to advertise for a new director and sort out a bunch of internal safety issues, that kind of shape, where how the building was set up inside. So anyway, but then that candidate accepted, and then he decided not to. So in the middle of a real crisis, because it was right at the time when we had to approve the next year's budget and deal with the notices, all the appropriate things so we could have a budget. So anyway, but at that point, I was kind of on the periphery of my contacts with ICRMP, because Craig had been handling them then, and it was kind of Derek's responsibility, but I was sitting in on it. And as I said, as Bob said, I remember when the library was told that we could enroll in the event of ICRMP. The board and the director at that time was delighted, because the benefits that were offered at a very affordable price, because very small budget, not a very robust tax base as Dan used it. So every penny counted, and this was a substantial savings to the library as far as what monies we had available to develop services. So it was a substantial reduction from what we had to pay before. And the relation that we had, the ICRMP person that I know the best and have worked with all these years is Jim McNall. And he was just a treasure. And so
incidents at different times in the community with people being very aggressive, almost violent and stuff, so talk to Jim about, you know, how can we get training for that, because ICRMP was offering us all these other extra resources, training resources, and all sorts of stuff. And so, he set up, for all the ICRMP entities in Boundary County, a training on violence in the workplace, thinking more domestic violence type thing, that handling that kind of thing, or mental health issues, that sort of stuff. But like I said, he was a delight to work with. He looked at ICRMP not just an insurance coverage, but as a technical
Partner.
assistance kind of thing. Dan and I are on something called the KVRI, Kootenai Valley Resource Initiative in Orangeburg. And it's a collaborative with the community, which would be like the library. And then all these agencies and stuff to provide technical support. So for us, ICRMP was a source. If we had a question, any kind of a legal issue, that kind of thing, how should we do this, what was the best thing to do? That's where we went. So, like I said, and even when I came back, well, Jim was still there. I wasn't working directly with Katie, who was the designated lawyer. She was talking to our local lawyer that the board had retained. And, because, you know, it's understandable. Idaho's population is growing, your counties are growing, you have more entities and that kind of thing. And as Jim said, his legal department at ICRMP with about 3 desks in the corner. And so, you know, answering everybody's, and the legal issues, you know, I'm well aware, I've been out of the library thing, but I read the newspapers and keep aware of what's going on, so I know that, you know, litigation has become almost a American pastime, and over everything, and that makes heavy demands on insurance companies of any kind, especially the unique kind of an entity that ICRMP represents, at least to me, and has represented to our libraries. And as things progressed, Carl and I worked very well together. He was very, very helpful, and had set up a face-to-face meeting with Katie and Jim. Jim was there too over at the Priest River Library to just go over the personnel issues and that kind of thing in detail. And I told Dan on the way down, the pandemic turned everything, the world upside down, but having to do these kind of face-to-face meetings on Zoom, you just don't really get a feel for the people, and it's just, well, like I said, it's flat, it's just very difficult to get without that real personal touch. So, I had an entirely different impression of Katie after I actually met her than when I did. I didn't even know what she really looked like, because she didn't put her picture on the thing, it was just representation. So anyway, like I said, just continued working with her, very helpful. Took a lot of the pressure off because all of the legalities that were involved and everything, that was beyond anybody on the board. Tim, you know, that wasn't his specialty either, HR stuff. And so, I was very happy, first to Carl, please, and then to Kate, that she would do what she did for us as far as determining, with all the investigating for all the evidence that we had, how to handle all things, but like I said, and then, we were in contact, quite either email or, on the phone. Hired Rod Kemper in, and of course, she had way more HR experience than I did. I mean, she was working on federally funded bank and how the federal audits benefits are, you have to have all your HR stuff. And again, that was not mine, I've been away from it for 5, almost 6 years. But again, I told her what I was seeing, what we needed to do, and she sorted through the files. I let her go through the former director's files, because I didn't know whether she needed to keep or whatever. So got all of that ordered, and then discussed the HR piece, because we're too small to have our own separate HR person. You know, we're an independent taxing district. We're not connected to the county, even though that's in our name. We're not connected to them, so we can't even get health insurance together with them, because 2 different pots of money. And so HR, bringing all the policies, we adopted ICRMP's personnel policies, March 31st. But, you know, they're the basics. It's like a template, so you adapt it for your individual organization, because one organization may be, well, like I said, the sheriff's office is an apple, and the county is orange, and the library will be a banana. So they're all fruit, but they're very, very different. So anyway, she was gathering up all of that information and making our policies more, well, again, best practices, compliant, making sure we're compliant in every way, so that the issue of transparency was no longer an issue, that everything was done just the way it was supposed to be, and that we could keep up with. So like when Bob read off the list of stuff that were done, we were doing and everything, and so I left, in March. I retired. By that time, I was basically just assisting in different places, and then while she was busy on all of this kind of these changes and stuff, that I could work at the desk as a director. You know, the library, as small as we are, we do everything.
This March, this latest March, is when, this last March is when?
This last March, about the middle of March.
Okay.
I managed to hurt my knee at the library, and so I was gonna have to be off anyway, and I wouldn't be able to come back until like after the end of April, so we decided to cut it off at that point. And after that, you know, I really wasn't involved that much. She would call once in a while to the place. I contacted her when the tort claim came down, because I'm your exhibit A of a ravening wolf pavement, and I'm not lost, so I didn't need to know what I might be facing in that direction. And at that time, they had the Munson hearings, the 2 employees, and the other one was coming up, but
Mr. Chairman, if we're gonna get into the tort claim, I'm gonna say, let's not do that, that's not.
no, I don't wanna go that way, but that was my reason for going in, otherwise I was pretty much out of it, not communication. So then until the new recall started, and the notice, I found out about the notice, but totally unaware of what the issues were, so. But,
Back to the questions you have, is how many employees?
right now, we have
How many?
3.
You went
I
from,
do have one other question, can I just follow, I'm just curious, real quick, before I forget.
you went from 14 to 3?
Well,
Excuse me.
over quite a period of time.
Yeah, not immediately, yeah, we had.
How many did we have as of Saturday? When Kimber retired, Derek?
Well, we started, yeah, we had started out in March after when Craig retired, I think we had
So 3.
10, and then we lost 4.
Go ahead, Lon.
Are they all full-time employees, or do you have part-time, full-time, part-time, or?
Actually, all 3 of them worked like, 2 of them worked 32 hours, 1 works about 26, and we have volunteers.
I do have one more question,
Okay.
if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Bob, it's okay if we call you Bob.
Sure.
You made a comment that you wasn't really aware of what was going on between ICRMP and your director.
That's correct.
You made that comment earlier. I'm just curious, how often does your board meet?
Quite a bit here lately.
I mean,
generally,
yeah.
once a month normally.
Okay.
I don't know, we just never at our meetings really ever talked about, the things what's going on with ICRMP and the directors per se. So in hindsight, it looks like we should have been getting more involved in the communication end of things.
Never talked about employee issues or anything like that? I'm
Uh,
just curious, I have a wife, my wife's a
Yeah.
library director,
Yeah.
and I'm just curious,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, it was pretty much, we'd go over, look at the trends with the library as far as use and financials and those types of things.
Okay.
To follow up on Ron, so when some of these claims that have really got our attention were employment claims,
Yeah.
the board wasn't consulted or told before those actions were taken?
I guess it depends on which actions.
The earlier ones, when I was in on director, yes.
No, the later ones.
Oh, this, the ones after.
So when.
Well, we did know what that there was going to be some actions taken, but we also thought that it was in concert with working with ICRMP.
And, okay.
Okay.
You thought that they were working with ICRMP?
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of questions, and one of them was just asked. I'm confused why the board was so unaware of what was happening in it.
We knew what was going on, and to a degree, but it's been going on for, gosh, I don't know, what, a year, well over a year.
Since March of 2021.
And we kept, getting some updates that we were working with ICRMP on it and whatnot, but, not a lot of specifics per se, I guess.
Did the board ever ask for ICRMP to be to a board meeting and, so that ICRMP could discuss that?
No.
Okay, and so another question if I may, what's the board gonna do to fix this? I'm really curious on how the board's gonna get more involved now and how you're gonna fix the.
Well, we're gonna try to obviously work on the communications and better and get more involved because, as a board, we're not directly involved in, it's the director does the hiring and firing and that type of thing. But obviously, in hindsight, there should have been more communication along that line.
So as I understand it, the board runs the library, the director just does the day-to-day stuff. The board tells them, well, maybe I understand what maybe should happen is the board should be giving the direction and the director should be doing the day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, the board sets policies and those type of things, but as far as the operation of the library, that's the director.
But that would be day-to-day stuff, but then the
Yeah.
director would be responsible to report to the board, in my mind, of what's happening with every situation that happens. If there's a claim, I would assume the board would be asking the director for a very clear understanding of what was happening with that claim, why it was happening, what's going on with the employee, what's happening. I mean, I would.
Yeah, and we, at the initial, stages of that, ICRMP wanted us to do an independent investigation, which we, did.
Who did that investigation?
Sonia Lee.
Yeah, Sonia Lee, I can't remember the name of the. that's.
And because you were having board meetings and Katie was sitting in on them.
Well,
And
she's.
when you.
Yeah, initially, yeah, she sat in on one or two early on. And wanted an independent investigation, which we had done. And then she proceeded working with the director as far as addressing the different issues there.
But the board did not know what those issues were and didn't know.
Well, we had an
what
idea what the
direction.
issues were, but we weren't aware of what type of negotiations or anything that there
Yeah,
was.
once the negotiation part started, seems to be where the communication went. Because, the board hires the director handles all the rest of it, managing and personnel and everything, but in the past, that was the pattern, that the board was always kept aware of potential issues, ongoing issues with personnel, or problems in the community, we're having problems with somebody in particular, that kind of. Confidentiality issues are involved too, so you have to be careful that way, but, the board isn't supposed to, and Jim was very plain about that, the board was not supposed to get directly involved in a lot of the interactions with the employees and that kind of thing, because it's not in the statutes for them to do that, they're supposed to be somewhat.
Okay, so.
Mr. Chair, do you have a full board right now? Alright, full board. How are you going to hire a new director? What steps are you taking?
Well, we'll advertise, we're currently looking for an interim director, and we're doing some reference checking on one of the applicants we have currently. But we're kind of in a desperate situation as far as getting a director, but we want to do our due diligence and, that person. And so we are gonna be in a short-term thing here where we'll probably have to do some reduced hours at the library, and I'm not sure how we're going to, actually do some of the things that the director would normally do. And I guess we'll be looking for some advice on that, I don't know, additional libraries or.
Mr. Chairman, how long was the former director the director? How many years was he in his position?
Craig?
No, the last director.
She, the last
Oh, the
director,
last,
she, I'm sorry, I said he.
was September, October of last year?
She had applied for the job in September. We interviewed her and hired her in October, but she did not start until officially start until first of December.
Till when, excuse me? Till when?
The board officially hired her, they interviewed her, hired her in October, the end of October. She didn't officially start as the director until the first of December,
What year?
2021. She hasn't been there for.
Woods Funeral Home Mammoth.
Mr. Chair, I have a follow-up question on that. Was she an employee of the library before she was hired? Okay.
She was employed at Sandpoint.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, maybe I'm cutting in. Sandra, you were the director up until 2016.
Yes.
How many directors have we had since 2016?
Craig Anderson and then Kim. Well,
Yes.
Ian was an interim, but.
Two.
How big your budget, annual budget?
Yeah, sure, you have.
Just a little under $500,000.
500,000. So what's the pay for, the director you're trying to hire?
Currently been, around $50,000, annual.
And any previous training or special requirements required for the position? Or-
Yeah, we have quite a list of qualifications that when we advertised this last time, I don't think I've got that written offhand, but, you know, ideally library experience and,
That's a
has
part-time.
degree and has some supervision skills and,
Is that a part-time or full-time?
It's full-time.
Full-time?
yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
thank you. Has the board discussed any policy changes? You indicated that you understand the board's role is as a policy body, a general policy, and you rely on the director for the day-to-day operations. Given the circumstances that have arisen and the experience you've had, the board can set a broad range of policies regarding reporting. I'm a mayor, I have a library, it's an independent board. That board has a policy that personnel-related issues the board is briefed on all the time. I mean, you keep up to date on that sort of thing because that's a significant liability, and that has to be handled correctly, and there's a protocol on how you do that. Listening to this conversation, it seems to me that the board may have had maybe a little bit too much reliance on the discretion of the director, and by the time you found out something was going on, it was down the road somewhere. I don't know if I'm mischaracterizing that, but that's kind of a read I'm getting from this discussion. So my question really is, have you discussed with the other three of you on the board?
There's about 5 of us.
The 5 of you, have you had a discussion, or do you intend to have a discussion on some policy decisions that are going to implement the communication issue you said needs to be improved, and maybe more specifically how that communication and what topics need to be communicated, and that sort of thing?
Yeah, we have been updating the policies as far as, addressing what you're saying there specifically. I would say we, up to this point, haven't done anything on that yet.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
You know, that's a fundamental concern, I think, for many of us on this board. I don't speak for everybody, of course, but, can you represent to me at all that there will be a significant discussion,
Yes,
policy changes?
Yes, and that's one of the reasons why we, just recently hired an HR help, is to try to stay ahead of all of those types of things. But yeah, that's definitely needs to be on our plate there.
So I would like more of a commitment than just, we'll have a discussion. I think that it's necessary that you have some definite policies that you're informed of. I mean, you've mentioned a number
We'll
of
have some
times
definite policies.
communication.
Yeah, we'll have some definite policies.
We've got, as you know, Sandra worked well with ICRMP. Sounds like you had a lot of interaction with Jim and the ICRMP staff. And that's part of our program, is to offer those services and to help people weave through legal issues when they arise. And if the board doesn't know that communication's not going on, then, you know, it ends up back on the plates of all the public entities in Idaho. And so it's very important that whoever you hire tries to develop a strong relationship with whoever your insurer is, to use the resources that they have. Have you looked at other insurers since you received our letter?
We have had, Kirby has been, has in the initial stages of, they're doing that, they've sent out information, to see what we can, possibly obtain in the future if we need to.
So have you had quotes back or?
No.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Sandra.
Speak up.
Sandra, you said that you were brought back in to. So you mentioned that you were brought in to audit the library. When was that, and what did you find from that audit?
As I said, everything needed to be tightened up and
Mr. Chairman,
more.
I think you need to clarify your definition of audit, because there is a
That's
different
a good-
library audit.
Not a financial audit.
It's not a financial audit, it's a book audit.
We have somebody that does, we have an annual audit.
So what audit did you do?
Systems audits, operations audit, that kind of thing, looking at how operations were managed and run.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I wanted to clarify that, because there are two different audits in the
Yeah,
library.
there's two
Okay.
different kinds of audits.
So you found that everything needed to be tightened up?
Yeah, there were changes needed to be made,
Like what changes?
clear, first just thinking of personnel policies, they needed much clearer, lines of communication. You know, my way of operation, the library is so small that, and this is my experience, it was run like a submarine. Captain knows how to do everything, the captain cook does everything that we cook if necessary, because every job in submarine, everybody has to be qualified to do it. So the staff is all generalists, so you learn all the general, and at the same time, you also learn the operating philosophy, customer service delivery, that kind of thing, so you have uniform customer service protocols, this is how you treat this. And, we also needed to be, looking at how we were doing things, processing books, that sort of thing, and maybe developing new teams, developing new efficiencies, that sort of thing. The relationship with the board, I have become aware that it wasn't quite as it had been. And the communication piece between the director and the board. Because again, like Jim mentioned more than once, that the boards are not supposed to really get that involved with making micromanaging, basically. But still at the same time, the board has fiduciary responsibilities of what the money issues, like this type of a thing. And so they need to be, and I agree, 150% profit. Now you need to add policies, the board will have to add policies that are very specific and also have, better lines of communication. This is the way it has to be. If you're not willing to work that way, then find someplace else to work. But the board has to.
So you're gonna apply for the position, right?
Mhm.
You're gonna reapply for the position.
I'm going to be 82 in June. But, you know, that's kind of thing, that kind of.
That's the new 62.
82 young, you're pretty young.
But, you know, that, I'm still consultant to the board, not to the staff or to the strictly to the board.
You're big enough that your, budget has to be done by a professional auditor, correct? Your budget is over you have to have a professional audit.
We do.
Have you had any problems with the audits?
No.
Okay.
Clean audit.
The financial audit.
We've always got a clean audit, there's some things that, being as small as we are, where you normally have two people to, kind of checks and balances, but being as small as we are, that's harder to do.
How much are your budgets for employees, personnel, versus operation of the library or purchase of books and things.
Yeah, our personnel budget, this last year with overhead and everything was going to be around 300,000.
Mr. Chairman, I understand that you don't wanna micromanage and you shouldn't be micromanaged. I understand that piece of it, but you still have to be involved in the library and that director, and you've mentioned clear communications. I mean, Sandra just mentioned, a number of things, personnel policies, clear communications. What's the board gonna do to fix those issues? I'm kind of interested in the fix at this point.
Well, we'll have to, address those things, like you say, with the board as a total. You know, and I think one of the ways we'll do that is probably look at some other libraries are doing to, see what we can obtain from them that are doing exactly the things you're saying. Personally, I don't know exactly what each of those things would be, but I think if we look around, we can figure out what we need to do there.
Well, I would think,
Yeah, I don't, Commission Libraries told us that they'd help us on that too.
I think one of your policies has gotta be, on such a small entity, that if your director decides to fire or hire, then the board ought to be aware of those situations before the action's actually taken. And I think that's pretty critical, that, I mean, you're not doing the hire or firing, but you can give them that responsibility, but they need to wait until you've looked at it and made sure that it's, everything okay, and that they've talked to ICRMP and made sure there's no legal issues that have happened or will happen.
Bob, can you tell me a little bit, you said you're gonna hire Omnia, is that right? It was an HR firm? Is that?
Yes, that's correct. We have hired them.
It's, how do you spell it?
OMNIA.
Okay, and can you tell me what exactly they're gonna do for you?
Let's see, we hired them to create an employee handbook, help on policy issues when appropriate, develop job descriptions, keep the library current on employment practices, and advise on personnel issues.
And where are they out of?
Coeur d'Alene,
And how many libraries do they currently consult with?
that I don't know.
Okay,
If I may,
He's
Mr. Chairman, Bob, when do you anticipate them having some of this done for you? How long of a process is this?
We've only been on board with them, I think this is probably our 3rd month or so.
Okay. Is it a year long, a 2-year, a 5-year,
Well,
a
it's
6
an
month?
ongoing, it's ongoing.
Well, I understand this ongoing, but I'm interested in a handbook, policy, job descriptions, employment practices, probably not in that order necessarily, but when, do we have any idea when you'll see some actual workable material from them?
Well, we have updated some, policies with their guidance, but, you know, the director had been working with them directly on that as far as the sequence and the timings, so I don't know that offhand. I can find out.
Have you had them, you haven't had them come to a board meeting then, I'm assuming?
We have not.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I just have a comment on that, because I wrote that down the very first thing. I'm curious, you hired an HR firm, did you work with ICRMP at all on doing some of this stuff? I mean, I gotta speak for example, okay? We got some issues in our library where I'm from, okay? And we work directly with ICRMP and Sandy and a few people, we got manuals, we got stuff like that, we got training and stuff like that. I'm just curious why you're hiring an outside firm and not go to ICRMP to ask them what they can offer to you. I'm just curious on
Yeah,
that.
well, actually, we have implemented some, have been talking to ICRIP too, and implemented, some policies there.
Because you're so small, and I know how much these HR firms cost. I'm just curious, and especially to go along the mayor's, comment,
Yeah.
why the board wouldn't be directing that versus the director directing that, because it should be the board, in my opinion, directing what that HR firm's doing. So you have an oversight and an oversee, so you know the timeline, you know what's going on, all that. I'm just curious why the board wasn't,
Yeah.
so, yeah. So I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Why you guys haven't been really involved on that with the HR, that high HR firm you hired, so.
Yeah, well, obviously, we need to do that.
Okay, the director that actually hired the HR firm, is that the director that's no longer with you?
That's correct.
Okay. Just asking some questions.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Dan.
I think that speaks the relationship between our credit and the director speaks to the question.
And up, down there? What was the question again?
The relationship between the past director and ICRMP may be part of why you're asking your question.
I know it did, but what I'm saying is, it's interesting, I gotta just voice my opinion, it's interesting that they go out and hire an HR firm without having the board completely involved in that and being the oversee of that, because you're creating personnel manuals and stuff like that, which the board is responsible for. So that was just interesting to me, yeah. I totally understand what happened, but I just, it's curious how it happened, yeah. So.
I'm curious, has the board had any communication with this Omni group?
I have not, no. I don't know if any of the other, members of the board have, but we have not as a whole, no.
I would think that would be an important step to take immediately.
Okay.
I think in addition to whoever you hire, I think one of the main qualifications is gotta be some people skills. And I think from the sounds of things, the board's got to get a lot more involved, especially at the beginning of the training of this, whoever you hire to make it work. I mean, I know being on a small board's not a big glorious thing, but once you're elected, you have a responsibility that the people have given you to oversee that thing. So I think that you really need to take it, more seriously in some of the advice that you give and direction that you give them. No?
You know, I don't wanna get ICRMP in the middle of who you hire and who you don't hire. I'm more interested in the process of what's gonna happen after they're hired, and what, my interest right here in this meeting today is to protect ICRMP. And at the end of the day, if I can go home and feel like we've protected ICRMP, then that's my interest. Most of the counties in the state depend on ICRMP. Most of the cities in the state depend on ICRMP. Most of the library districts and fire districts and school districts depend on ICRMP. And so when we made the decision that we made to send you the letter to create this meeting today here, I didn't take it lightly, and I know nobody else on the board took it lightly. At the end of the day, we have to protect what we've been, take care of the responsibilities we've been given, and to protect the ICRMP, and yet for all of its members. And so I'm hoping to hear what's gonna happen, what policies, what your interest is, how you're going to protect ICRMP with us. And I'm quite frankly not hearing that.
Yeah, well, we do need to work with ICRMP closer, and I realize that that's been a weakness And it's been a learning experience. I haven't really been in a public, position like this before, and, our previous director passed away here, about a year ago, so I've got a lot to learn. And I'm certainly willing to implement whatever we need to implement.
Well, and I wanna thank you for coming down and making the trip down, both of you. It's not an easy trip from.
Not an easy way to get
Further,
down
there's
here.
no easy way to get down here, regardless if it's in the air or on the road, it doesn't matter, but it's not easy, I know that, so I appreciate you coming down. I'm having a hard time understanding or getting the feel right now that I feel like I can help protect and take care of ICRMP and all of the members that I've been asked to look after, right now. And so,
I think part of the reason that I'm having that same issue is they haven't been able to hire a director yet, so we don't know who that person is and how they will operate. And,
Yeah, it's been a short term, we didn't have a lot of time, but and like I mentioned, we wanna do our due diligence, fill in that position, because we don't wanna end up where we are
what,
right now.
how many applicants have you had? Do you have a pool of few people to look at and interview and,
Well, right now, we haven't formally advertised for the permanent director yet, we're trying to find someone on an interim basis
Mr. Director?
to fill that
I
position.
know, as far as the discussion who they're gonna hire, I think that's a separate direction. The real issue is they can hire anybody they want, but if they don't have policy and procedures set up, it won't matter who they hire. And I think that's what we're looking at right here. What kind of policy and procedures you can have set up so when you hire somebody, you can sit down with that person, give them the directions they need based on what you've learned from the past. That's really what this is about. Because I don't care who you hire, if you don't have directions for them, and the board understands their responsibilities and what they need, how they need to direct them, anything can happen. I don't care who the person is. And I think that's what we're looking for. What directions, policy, procedures, what do you think you're gonna change in the future to help that director succeed and do what they need to do? I think that's what we're looking for.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
yes?
Well, I'm not gonna be the director. Develop strategies.
Yes.
Yes, John?
Bob, there's 5 members, 5 trustees for the board. Did you come down here with any authority to speak on behalf of the board?
Yes, we had a board meeting where we decided, who would come down and it was actually, it was gonna be Aaron and myself. There was conflicts with, some of the other board members as far as being able to come down here.
I think that's a good comment, Mayor, because he can come down and discuss this before actually making decisions on policy and procedures. You really need to go back to the board.
It does. The reason for the question really was, and this is John Evans speaking here, not the board, certainly. But, would you be in a position to make, commitments to a timeline to achieve certain benchmarks and getting some of these things that we're concerned about done?
Certainly.
So if, through discussions with, ICRMP, various policies related to personnel, whatever risk management policies need to be in place, training protocols for the staff, some of those things, I just wanted to know if you'd be in a position, of course, to make those kinds of commitments, and that, whether or not that impacts the decision the board makes or not, I don't know. But from my perspective, you had a library that seemed to function well until 2016. Between 2016 and now, we have this unacceptable loss ratio to deal with the issue that Brian just brought up, and we're glad And we need to get back into a direction, where we're operating as we did between 1995 and 2016. So, that would take a significant commitment on the board's part. It would take some, time commitment from board members. A lot of this you can't really delegate now. Obviously, it's going to delegate it to. So, I think you've answered my question, and I'll bring that up again perhaps later in our discussion. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the board? Do you guys have any final comments you'd like to make?
I don't believe so, other than, we're, most certainly willing to implement, whatever we need to do to get on track. And we'll work with ICRMP and the Idaho Idaho Library Commission to get help there also.
Thank you.
If I could say something.
Yes.
Bob and I have discussed this, prior to this, when you got the notice and everything. You were talking about the service ICRMP is for all the entities and stuff. Our library was started with a wheelbarrow full of books by Reader's Club in 1913, 109 years. Community support of the library, and the library supported the community. So we both agreed, we said, I can say it, we'll do whatever we need to do to make sure that we not just sustain it, maintain it, but to help it continue to grow, to be the kind of resource that it has been in the past for the community. We're not a building full of books, it's the people place in it. And so, like I said, people have been very, very supportive and library. And while I'm not stepping back in as director, I will continue as their consultant, especially as far as, and the state library does provide very thorough and detailed trustee training on their responsibilities. As I said, it's a fine legislative line on doing what you can and is allowed and not overstepping either. Then we're back to another out of the frying pan in the fire type of situation.
Thank you. Okay, Lord, we have a decision to make, and I guess our options are to.
I can help you out.
Yeah, help me out here.
Your options are to do nothing, in which case the previous decision that you've made will stand, and that is the non-renewal, 2 weeks, to find other insurance. Another option is to simply reverse course and say we'll renew at whatever terms you work out with your underwriting team. And another option is to take the same thing you did with NIC, which is to do a short-term policy. In NIC's case, it was so they could obtain insurance. In this case, it might be along the line with what Mayor Evans was speaking about, giving them a window to put together the things that have been raised by many of the people here.
Mike, I guess that's something I wrote down. I wrote that down here. That we could make it a short-term decision to extend the insurance maybe to the first year sometime based upon direction and timeline from the board. And then make a decision again on what we're gonna do then, right?
Mr. Chairman, you can renew under the statute for 90 days.
Okay.
And you don't need to go through another notice of non-renewal during that 90-day period. However, you could look at it and determine that you would reconsider, potentially renew further, depending upon what shakes out at the district.
So
how
if
they set us.
we made the 90 days, it'd be till January 1st, basically. If you go from October 1st Be pretty close, wouldn't it?
That would sound right.
I'm counting here, trying to.
You might be a day short, but.
Dan?
Just some clarity, when we're talking about the, 90 days. And would there be triggers that we would put in there?
Yes.
It's been very difficult for me in my life to develop any kind of a good policy within 90 days. And so we want to be careful we're not putting it on the table again, whatever that might be.
And Commissioner, I agree with you, but if there was a possibility, came back to the timeline and said, we're gonna have this done by this done by then, this done by then, it may be not longer than 90 days, but at least we know they're working on the process. I think that's what our concerns are. What are they actually really doing? You know?
It's a timeline as opposed to a finished product.
And when you look at the HR firm they hired, they have no idea what they're doing, so they have no idea if they have a timeline.
So the timeline could be extended, is what you're saying, if they're making progress.
Mr. Chairman, theoretically, you could do it in 90-day increments.
Yeah.
Right, that's what.
But, obviously, sooner or later, you have to make a decision as to whether or not to do a full policy on what terms.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chairman, I can't argue that making good policies in 90 days I mean, there's not a lot of times you can do that necessarily, but they've got a group that's been working on these for how long? When did you hire?
About 3 months. Well, 3 months ago with that Omnia, but we have implemented personnel policies too, as we've been going on.
So I mean, that's 6 months of the consultants, and within 6 months, they ought to have some pretty solid, I would think, policies.
Omnia hasn't been working for 6 months.
No, but we have implemented, new ICRMP suggestions of personnel policies.
And so I would feel a lot better if the board is even interested in giving an extension of a few days, that we see definite timelines and they need to report to the board on what's happening in those timelines. I would like the board, if they've got a full board, I would like them to meet more than once a month. I think unfortunately they're serving, and it's hard to drag a volunteer to a meeting, a lot necessarily, but I think we're in a position that they're gonna have to do something that is extraordinary to make that happen. And I think you can get some policies in 90 days, I think that could happen, but that's what I'm interested in, is seeing what those policies are.
Dan, did you have any other comments? Let's just go around the room. Dan?
I get you first.
Pardon?
I get you
Yes,
first.
you want to be
first. This is close enough.
Yeah.
And there's a whole lot of peripheral issues that we're discussing. It can't be. And what we're looking at is very fair, I think. But I don't want to tie the hands to a board of volunteers going into a holiday season and have an expectation that can't be met. So I think the report from them as to what they've already got accomplished. Go ahead and do the 90 days. We have another meeting.
December.
October.
We have one in October, we have one in December.
And see what comes out of that report. Where we are possibly in a timeline, if they talk to ICRMP, to those involved, and see what it is. Is that making any sense?
So, Mr. Chairman, as a board, I'm comfortable with this, going 90 days, with some kind of guidance in there that not only our board review it, but also it needs to go through ICRMP for their review to make sure they're following what we need to do to make sure we're covered by insurance. So I think it's not just us reviewing it, ICRMP staff needs to review it, and then in 90 days, we look and see where they're at.
Right, but
I'm like you, I don't wanna tie their hands so bad they can't get it done, but if they're making progress, then we need to look at it, yeah.
Tim and Sandy would have to work on that with them.
Yeah.
And then they could follow up. I think it would be to your advantage if we do that, to really stay in close contact with Tim and Sandy.
And I'd prefer to have the ICRM staff help put together the timeline on what they think's needed and stuff like that, because as a board member, I can make things up. I can say things, but it'd really be nice. What does Tim want, you know?
Yeah.
Tim and his staff, what do they need to make it look like they're, you know, I guess the thing that irritates me is they hired an HR firm and nobody really knows what they're doing. You know, I just, you know.
Yeah.
Did you make a prepayment to these guys, Bob? Do you know what kind of a payment schedule or your commitment, kind
I
of
think
contract
it's,
you signed with them?
I think it's, on a monthly type thing, but I think we, if I remember right, it's like for years, like, for years' time.
Okay, so you think you're stuck for a year?
I'd have to check, I'm not
Well,
sure.
it is what it is,
Yeah.
you know, look, the staff will, be more than willing to, engage with, the board for the Boundary County Library District, find out where you are at on your personnel policies and all the other aspects of HR, give you recommendations, like the board already said, we insure a lot of the library districts around the state, so we're pretty well versed in our ability to evaluate what your policies are at and whether they're up to date. The one thing that we can't do is we can help you out with the policies, but the board has to be engaged on following through with those policies and enforcing them, and that's beyond our ability, to help you out with. I think that's what my board, this board here is trying to communicate to you as far as, not only get the policies, but you also gotta engage on that.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I mean, just one comment. And actually, this is not really an ICRM issue, it's more of a board issue. But if you're gonna sign a contract and commit with somebody for that dollar amount, I really think the board should have a policy that they're responsible for signing those contracts. That should be the board's responsibility. That's just a personal opinion, but that scares me.
It is a board,
Yeah, you know, yeah.
in my mind, that is a board.
It is in my mind, it is a board responsibility, yeah.
Patty, do you have any comments? Okay, Justin.
I appreciate you coming down. Little districts affect us all a lot. And so I guess that's why this is important, and you see some quick transition. And I think it'll happen, but it's important to everybody.
Brian?
Yeah, I would, I'm not against giving an extension, but maybe I'm just stuck on this and I gotta get over it, but the board doesn't know what's going on and hasn't known what's going on. You've hired a HR firm, but you don't know what that contract looks like. You've got some policies in place, I think. I think you've got a personnel handbook. I don't know that. I would like to be able to see what the personnel handbook looks like. I would like to see what what you said you implemented ICRMP's personnel policy on March 31st. So I'm assuming that we know what that looks like, but I don't know what it looks like in your terms. I'm interested in the handbook from the employee handbook. I'm really interested in the employment practices. I'm interested in knowing what the board's going to do to make sure you follow ICRMP's legal advice when something happens. That doesn't seem to have happened. There's a lot of questions that I have. A handbook, policy, the job descriptions are the least of my concern right now, quite frankly, and maybe it should be more of a concern, but I think before you hire somebody, you need to have these policies so they know what to expect. And I don't know how you keep your library open without having a director, but I agree with with Commissioner Rasmussen that we've got, you hire somebody, but you don't have anything for them, they don't know what the policies are. That's difficult at best to function as a director, and so I would be supportive, but the timelines for me are a lot faster than 90 days. I would expect by the end of next week, ICRMP has your handbook, a copy of your handbook. ICRMP has your personnel policies and everything that you have when it comes to employees, so that we can at least see where you are, and then I would expect to see progress we got a board meeting in October. I would expect to see a lot of progress in October of what's happening and how you've worked with ICRMP and things to move this forward. That would be my expectation. I mean, we're saying timelines, and nobody's given us any timelines. My timeline would be next week, I wanna know what you have. And then I wanna see the next week what you've done and how you're getting it better, and it's a lot of work to put on a volunteer. And it doesn't necessarily have to be week by week, but I'm not willing to wait 90 days to see what you've done.
I think as far as the work they're doing, that needs to be ongoing, like you just said,
Yes.
but the policy extension is 90 days, you said.
Well, you can issue, Mr. Chairman, you can issue a extension for 90 days under the statute without having to go through the non-renewal notice again. You can obviously do it shorter, but you go beyond 90 days, then you've got essentially a policy that you have to, if you determine the non-renewal later time.
Then we get to Dan's
And
problem, the sixth time. Okay, John?
Thank you. Well, God bless you for being a volunteer trustee. I mean, you're kind of getting both barrels here today, but as it's been stated, our fiduciary covers lots of folks, and we're collectively in the state in bed with you, so to speak, on this. So that's why the scrutiny. It's not at all personal. It's fulfilling our own fiduciary. But I do want to express, I applaud you and the other trustees for being willing to serve on a volunteer board to benefit those in your community. Libraries are important. And I know there are collateral issues up there, but I'm going to support the notion of the extension.
And you said the magic word. I was just reminded by our underwriter that the actual term, it'll be a new policy, a new 90-day policy rather than an extension.
I'm going to support the creation of a new policy. Sorry, I should have been making eye contact with you. And I'm not going to reiterate the things that have been said. I think you've got the message there. But thank you for coming down. We want you to succeed, and we're hopeful that you'll help us help you succeed.
Greg?
I just have the same concerns, for purposes of time, the mayor's not here and everyone else.
I'll keep it really short. Thanks for what you do. I appreciate it, because like I said, my wife, she's not a librarian anymore, but she's more of a consultant. She goes back and helps. And being on the library board is that big money you guys make. It keeps you there. I know it's a hard job, it really is. And go back to the mayor's comment, you can't run a library without a director. Bear Lake did it. Feel free to call me. I'll tell you how they did it for about 6-7 months while they worked through some issues, okay? There was a way they did it. The only thing is, as a board, you're more involved. But they made it work, and actually think everything's working good now, just so you know, so you can resolve the issues. I'm supportive of a new policy for 90 days, I really am, with the timelines, whether it be at the end of the month or what for our October meeting. But I think it needs to be guided through the ICRMP and ICRMP staff. I really do, because they understand this better than we do, Sandy and stuff like that. So, like I said, thanks again. If you wanna know how Bear Lake did it they actually did it for a year, feel free to call me, I'll let you know. I'm actually the one that put it together for them, the plan and how they did it, and it actually worked for them, so.
Thank you.
Ken?
I agree with most of what's been said here. I was hoping for a little more and I realize you've started, you've hired a firm to help you put a policy manual together and an employee handbook together. But I was hoping for a little more, we've fixed this problem here, we've fixed that problem here, we're taking these steps, we're gonna take these steps in the future, more of an outline of what you're gonna do to fix the problem that we've got. And I didn't really hear that from you, but I do support the 90-day deal and hopefully we can work with you to get that put together so that I feel comfortable with. Like I said, I didn't really hear, this is what we've done, other than the personnel manual. This is the steps we're gonna take in the future. But I appreciate you coming down, I admire you for doing that, makes a huge statement in my mind, that you took the time to come down and meet with us. So,
Mark, you're new, do you have any, throw you in the fire?
I wasn't gonna say anything, but I will jump in. Kenny touched on it. I would agree with his comments. I was looking for a little more enthusiasm of, yeah, we're gonna jump right in and get this taken care of and just work down the line and get our ducks in a row. On the other hand, I did hear that there was some commitment there, but the enthusiasm was the part that I felt was lacking. I am sympathetic to their cause and their situation, and I certainly would support a 90-day, try to help them along and get back on the road.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'll go ahead and make a motion.
Well, I don't think we need one.
Oh.
Yes,
Oh,
actually, you do.
We do need one.
You need a motion, yeah.
Before we do that one, Richard, I was a mayor for quite a while, on the city council for about 30 years. And I've been on a small board for about 45 years. And being on the small board is a lot harder, in my opinion, than being the mayor of a fairly good-sized city. Because you don't have the resources and the staff to help you, so it takes a lot. I mean, you really gotta get into it and help them. I think it's help they need more than anything, and you've gotta know what's going on as well as the director or anybody else. So I think your board needs to take a lot stronger actions than you've taken in the past. And Sandra, I think they ought to name the library after you. Okay, Mom.
No, I'm named after the library. I don't have a last name in Boundary County, and I was worried about Sandy at the library.
Before I make the motion, I just need to say one thing. The problem with small boards, they have no idea what they're getting into. You realize that? And I brought this up, you guys realized a couple meetings ago, ICRMP needs to work somewhere getting training to train small boards of their responsibilities. I really think we do, because all of a sudden you're elected, you're put in that position, and you think you should know something, and all of a sudden you end up here going, wow, I didn't realize I was supposed to be doing all this. So I think, also as ICRMP, and I mentioned this a couple meetings ago, we really need to look at something for some small board training, because this is not unique to you guys, just so you know. But I would like to make a motion, we have to go ahead and do a new policy, a 90-day policy for Boundary County Library District. And actually they'll work with this ICRMP staff to come up with some timelines and guidelines. And on the October meeting, we'll have an update, and basically that's my motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Mayor?
They'll work on timelines and stuff. Is there any way for you to put timelines into your motion?
I hate to do that until they actually have a chance to sit down with the staff and figure out what the timeline needs to be. I tell you now, the volunteer board to say we're gonna have something done in a week or 2 weeks.
That's true.
Even the open meeting law notices and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We're really cramping them things in, yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with you. That's why I said October, we'd have something by October.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Every community needs a library, so we need to do what we do to keep libraries open. I'm a true supporter of libraries.
One of the most
But,
important